Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 5 realities you need to know about your gut. We are now going to hopefully have good sound, and we will do this presentation without any internet interruptions. As you can see, I have a buddy online with me tonight so that if there are any difficulties, she can unmute herself and talk to me directly. If I get disconnected, she can call me. So hopefully we won't have any hiccups. What I'd like to do first is make sure you can all hear. So yes, Melissa's saying yes, good. So, oh great, Ricky, you're back, yay. Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to call up the PowerPoint. I will warn you that just before I started, I was cutting in and out again, but for some reason I've stopped, and I don't know why it does that. I've got this plugged in with an Ethernet cable tonight. I've been, thinking of everything I can do to make sure the connection is good. So hopefully that will do it, and I'm just going to call up the PowerPoint. Sorry, I just have to get to the beginning of the PowerPoint. And we will start. Now, I apologize for those of you who came on Tuesday and, you were having such difficulty. And unfortunately, because there's the way it worked out that some people who couldn't make it on Tuesday could make it Thursday. So I have to start at the beginning and go through the intro again. So I'll try to get through it very quickly, and because I know you've already heard that part, because if I understand correctly, that part worked well. And it was just a little bit later than that it started to get choppy. Okay, so here we go. So here's our agenda. I'm going to talk a little bit about me and how I arrived where I am today. And then we'll get into the 5 realities you need to know about your gut, the #1 perspective you need to adopt, and then what you can do to improve your digestive and gut health. Okay, so I am a parental unit for my niece, who I was just trying to get her to help me figure out why it was cutting in and out, and she had no idea either. So last scene, she was looking for a pair of headphones for me, and she has not returned. I took over looking after her when my sister passed away, and as you can imagine, that was the kind of event that we do tend to go through that makes us think twice about our health and health issues and that sort of thing. And I've had several of those in my life, and it really has helped frame sort of where I come from and why I do what I do. I'm the creator of the Jumpstart Digestion Program, and all of the information you're hearing tonight is from the Jumpstart Digestion Program, and I will be telling you how to get more information at the end if you are interested. I'm also the creator of the Healthy Gut Certificate Program, and that's for practitioners. And I'm founder and director of CanPro, which is the Canadian Association of Holistic Nutrition Professionals, and it seeks to regulate holistic nutritionists. And I never intended to do this kind of work, but through watching my students at the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, where I've taught for 15 years, seeing what they can accomplish and, all the good work that they do helping their clients with their case studies and all that sort of thing. I just want to help more people have access to holistic nutritionists. It's very rewarding to see that the people I teach go on to help other people. Obviously, I am a holistic nutritionist, and I specialize in gut health and estrogen dominance. And last but not least, I'm a pastry chef and have been for 25 years, and I love marrying my 2 professions together. I do a lot of product development for companies. I also do it for my own business, and I do it for my stomach. Of course I do it for my stomach. All right, so this is my story. I had endometriosis starting from the age of 22. And it was the last bout in 2002 that sent me on a course of research and investigation. It was unfortunate, but they found a huge fibroid that was about the size of a cantaloupe. I also had a cyst on each ovary. They also told me I had a lot of scar tissue that had pasted my uterus to my colon, and they wanted me to have a hysterectomy. I didn't want me to have one. I've had 2 surgeries. I had managed to come out of them without having any parts removed, and just something told me not to do it. So I started going to alternative practitioners, and I saw an herbalist who told me to be a vegetarian, and I saw a homeopath who had had similar issues and resolved hers. And she told me to go off gluten and dairy. And I did do it because, not because I thought I had an issue with gluten and dairy, but because, you know, I believe you do things with an open mind. And I thought, okay, I'll just go with the flow and just do it. Didn't help me at all. And that's not an uncommon story. I've heard that many, many times. And it wasn't until I came across an OBGYN named Dr. Joel Evans. And he basically saved me because he explained to me what was wrong with me. And I was seeing him at a webinar. This is not, I did not go to see him in private practice or anything like this. I was attending a webinar on estrogen dominance, and he was just explaining, you know, the different pathways in the body that cause the issues. And so one of the things he explained to me was that when you have poor gut health, the estrogen, which needs to leave the body because you need to detox out estrogen on a regular basis, has trouble leaving, and this is what makes you estrogen dominant. And so from that piece of information, I was able to start working on my gut health. I was a holistic nutritionist at the time, so, you know, I did have an advantage in that regard. And I just kept working on it, and it took a few years, but I never did have the hysterectomy, and that was over 10 years ago. So I'm very grateful for Dr. Evans for giving me that information, but it also kind of has framed, you know, I know things are possible. I know that you can make changes in your body if you need to. It's not easy, and I'm not saying there's simple fixes, but it is possible. So, you know, you or maybe a friend or a family member, you may have health issues that you didn't plan on having. We never do plan on these things. And it's quite heartbreaking when your body does not behave as you wish, especially if you can't find out why. And you can go to a doctor and they can tell you what you have sometimes. Sometimes it's diagnosable because you fall within the criteria that allows them to diagnose with a specific condition, but they seldom can tell you why. And I don't know about you, but for me, I always want to know why. Why me? Why did this happen to me? If I did something, or if something happened that brought this on, then maybe I can undo it by doing something else. That's sort of my logic. And, you know, when you have these health issues, it doesn't help when you lead a busy life because you've got all these family and work responsibilities. And when you don't feel your best, it colors how you see your entire life. And people can, you know, get very depressed and sad and just trying to deal with something physical as well as everything else they have to do. And let's face it, life is meant to be enjoyed, and feeling good is the key to enjoying life. Now, our knowledge right now about our body has limits. The health information is evolving all the time, but it can be a struggle to keep up to date. You have to, you know, I read research all the time, and I know most people aren't going to do that. The good news is that the new knowledge that's coming out is great. It's opening more doors for solving our dilemmas, and it is giving us more information that we can use to help our bodies function better. So my goal tonight is to share some of this information in hopes of giving you a new perspective and opening up some new options for you. So here we go with the 5 realities you need to know about your gut. All right, so I thought I'd start with some statistics so we can sort of have a framework for this particular issue with digestion and intestinal issues. And in Canada, it costs nearly $18 billion annually, and it's $141 billion in the US. And about 60 to 70 million people in the US have some type of digestive problem. It could be celiac disease, acid reflux, constipation, lactose intolerance, IBS, Crohn's, colitis, allergies, food sensitivities, and it would be proportionally similar in Canada. And that all costs money. It costs a lot of money. There's a lot of prescriptions being written. There's a lot of practitioner visits. And in many cases, there's hospitalizations, and it's quite a big problem. The sad part is that many of these conditions are preventable. And so with a little bit of knowledge, and if we understood how our bodies work and what it's looking for, we could possibly prevent many of these conditions. And in some cases, when we have the conditions, improve, how we function and maybe even get rid of them. The current research is focused on one area, and they're looking right now at what they call the microbiome. So they're doing this because they've discovered a lot of information about how the microbiome helps us. And in particular, they're looking for what I call a smoking gun, a specific strain of bacteria or some specific type of function that's going to explain everything. It doesn't quite work like that. The microbiome refers to trillions of bacteria located in and on our body. So it's in our mouth, it's on our skin, it's in our small intestine and large intestine, so it's in our urinary system, and it's in the vaginal area if we are female. So this is just a chart that shows sort of the level of research that's going on right now for the microbiome. And you can see that in the 60s, there was basically none. And then in 2000, it started to climb. And you can see in 2013 and 14, there was between 2,500 and 3,000 published studies. And I've seen the information for 2015, and there's close to 5,000 already. So this is a huge, huge area of focus right now. And there's about 200 universities and research facilities that are involved in what they call the Microbiome Project. And they are mapping the good bacteria so that they know what kind of strains are there. They're studying them to see what they do. They're learning all kinds of information. They're looking at them for health conditions. So this is a huge area of focus in research, and it's all good news. Over time, we're just going to learn more and more, and it's going to be helpful to all of us. So I thought I would talk about the function of the gut, because if you understand a little bit about it, then you can see just how important it is and how much you can benefit when your gut functions well. So your gut is a thriving microcosm of life. As I said, it has trillions of microbes, and they're living in what they call the gastrointestinal tract, or the GI tract, which starts in your mouth and goes through the stomach, and then the duodenum, and then the small intestines, and then the large intestines. And that's your GI tract. And the good bacteria that is in the small and large intestines is also the good bacteria that populates the urinary system and the vaginal area. They actually are manufactured in the intestines, and then they migrate to those two other areas. So the intestines really is the key for most of the good bacteria that you need to function with. The microbes on your skin are somewhat different. They're not necessarily all the same microbes that are in the intestines. There are a few similarities, but they kind of function on their own. So you have over 1,000 species and 5,000 strains. And if a strain would be something like Lactobacillus acidophilus, which most likely you've heard of, or Lactobacillus rhamnosus. And what you have to understand is there's many strains that are called Lactobacillus acidophilus. So what they're doing when they map it is they give them each a little number or a name so that they can identify these different strains. How many Lactobacillus acidophilus strains you have in you, no one knows, and no one ever will know probably, because we're all very diverse. And the gut bacteria that we have is unique to us as individuals. It's like fingerprints. There are no two guts the same. And this is one of the reasons why it's going to be difficult for them to make too many definitive conclusions about function of strains and things like that. But it's not as complicated as it may sound at this time, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And the majority of these microorganisms are beneficial, and it's what we call the good bacteria. However, even the bad ones have a benefit. As long as they are at low levels, what they do is they aid the health of the good bacteria and the immune system by basically keeping the good guys active and fit. So by being present and the good bacteria being forced to sort of, defend against them, it keeps them very active and very prolific and, in shape. So you can kind of think of them as boot camp trainers for the microbiome. And right now, and you may have heard some of this if you read the internet, or I've heard it on the news, and a lot of, people who speak about the gut are talking about it. Diversity is a really big factor that they're focusing on right now. So within you, the bacteria that is native to you is known as residential bacteria. And the amount and diversity of these strains develops in each of us by the age of 2. And many factors are going to determine how we develop our microbiome when we're infants. So whether we're breastfed, if we're delivered vaginally, was the mother exposed to antibiotics when she was pregnant? Was the mother exposed to antibiotics if she's breastfeeding? A lot of times if a baby is born cesarean, they're automatically given antibiotics, and so is the mother. These are all factors that determine whether or not a baby gets the best start with developing their own good bacteria. So they get good bacteria from breast milk, they get it from coming down the vaginal chute. They also get some, and this is really new information, from the mother in the womb. So they have discovered that the mother's good bacteria will travel through nerve cells to the infant while the infant is still in the womb. So we are not born sterile as they had previously thought. So how well or how much, or all of this is going to depend on the mother and how good her good bacteria is when she gets pregnant. So, having strategies to help women when they get pregnant have the best microbiome they can have when they're pregnant, and then when they're breastfeeding, is going to help the baby have a better start as well. Now, the other thing they're looking at, so just in case, you're listening to this and either yourself or maybe your children, they maybe have delivered cesarean, or they weren't breastfed, or both, or whatever, or maybe antibiotics were introduced. There's still options available for those children to catch up to the ones who are breastfed and vaginally delivered by the age of 2. And of course, if you're listening to this and your children are now older than 2, there are strategies that they can employ that can also help them have better microbiomes, even though they didn't develop this diversity by the age of 2. And it may mean in those cases that those children or adults who find themselves in this situation have to do certain strategies that are, a little more intensive than other people, but at least we're learning now that there are things that they can do. And then once we have this diversity of strains, then we seem to be spending the rest of our life mucking it up with stress. The type of foods we can eat can affect it, our lifestyle, drugs, especially antibiotics. They all play a role in how we maintain our microbiome. And we lose diversity in microorganisms when we are older. But my question is, should we? Because they're looking at people who are old now, and they're looking at their diversity and comparing it to younger people. But what we don't know is if had they had good strategies to maintain their microbiome, would they still have a diverse microbiome as an older person? We don't know that. So I'm not giving up on aging people either. So I think that we just need to know what we need to do. And as I said, they are looking at diversity, and you may think diversity just refers to strains of good bacteria, but it also refers to strains of bad bacteria or parasites and things like that. And they have linked a lot of health conditions to a lack of diversity. And what they're saying right now is that we need more exposure to the outside world, so we are exposed to more microbes, both good and bad. And they've done studies where they've looked at rural Africans and compared their diversity to people in Western cultures. And they found that they have a much more diverse set of microbes. Plus, they also have lower incidence of the common intestinal disorders like Crohn's and colitis. They have low levels of heart disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity, and allergies. And they're more exposed to dirt and nature. So I have a picture here of a woman, she's grinding grain in a stone. So stone grinding the grain. And that stone is not sterile. You can't sterilize a stone, it's not stainless steel. And of course, she's doing it outside, and you can see she's got tools on the ground there. Well, apparently there's some beneficial organisms in the soil that are very good for us. So this is really interesting, and we're going to be hearing more and more about this, that we live in too clean an environment. We use too many antibacterial cleaners and soaps and things like that, and our immune system needs to be kept active, and our good bacteria needs to be practicing fighting off, pathogens. So look for more information to be coming out about that in the near future. One of the other interesting aspects of diversity has to do with weight loss. So they've discovered lack of diversity in a number of conditions in Western cultures that is playing a role. But the latest, of course, is weight gain and weight loss. And lack of diversity has been linked to weight gain. And there was a study done recently that had linked fiber to being able to promote the diversity of the microbiome in favor of types of bacteria that are better for utilizing carbs, proteins, and fats, and better for vitamin and mineral absorption. And this helps improve metabolism. So they've got a direct link between good bacteria and the diversity of bacteria strains and it benefiting our metabolism. So think about that. I mean, that's now, it's going to put a whole different slant on how we look at counting calories, that calories are not just calories, that something's supposed to happen to the food that may or may not be happening. And as a result, it's causing weight gain. So I thought I would just quickly go through some of the functions of the good bacteria, the good microflora, just to give you a sort of an overview of just how all-encompassing it is and involved in so many things. So it aids the digestion of all foods, and it works synergistically with all nutrients to aid absorption. It's involved in the production of specialty enzymes such as lactase, and it increases the bioavailability of phytonutrients and makes them more beneficial. So there's a lot of functions going on. If you, for example, are lactose intolerant, then you need lactase enzymes. And if you don't have enough good bacteria, you won't have it. So if you are lactose intolerant, you know that you need more good bacteria. The same is true if you have trouble digesting raw vegetables. You need cellulase enzymes to digest the hard cellulose fiber in vegetables. And again, the good bacteria is involved in the production of that. The phytonutrients are a whole other story because these are those chemicals found in various foods. And they're, whenever you hear about blueberries or any other food being so good for you, they're always talking about the phytonutrients, these special chemicals they found in the foods. And they have a synergistic relationship with the good bacteria, and they are made more bioavailable and usable by the body, which makes them far more beneficial to us when we have sufficient good bacteria to interact with them. So that's a really important thing too. Now, you may have heard that inflammation is being linked, or chronic inflammation is being linked to most health conditions like heart disease or cancer, depression, diabetes, osteoarthritis, osteoporosis, autoimmune diseases. Inflammation is involved with all of these. And chronic inflammation means that, inflammation is good when you've cut yourself and you need to heal your arm. It's going to swell up, and that's inflammation. It's going to seal off the area while the body heals. And inflammation is actually part of the healing process. However, if you are constantly inflamed, it means your body's constantly trying to heal you for some reason. And the inflammatory products that are made can be quite damaging if they're there for too long. So, you know, having inflammation for a short period of time is a good thing. Having it all the time is a bad thing. And one of the things that the good bacteria does is regulate inflammation in the body. So they produce anti-inflammatory chemicals that turn off inflammation in the body. And of course, bad bacteria produces inflammatory chemicals that turns on inflammation in the body, which makes sense since they are pathogens. And therefore, you would hope that your immune system would react to them in that way because they're not the good guys. So this is just another area where the good bacteria is playing a very, very key role. Other functions, good bacteria helps detox out toxins and heavy metals. It produces neurotransmitters and short-chain fatty acids for the brain. So it can produce serotonin, which is our antidepressant neurotransmitter. And serotonin also converts to melatonin, which would help us sleep. GABA is another neurotransmitter the good bacteria makes, and that helps us with anxiety. And there's a lot of communication going back and forth between the brain and the gut. They call that the brain-gut connection. And so the brain tells the gut things and the gut tells the brain things. And it's really a really fascinating area of you know, how we function that they didn't know before. Good bacteria also help stabilize blood sugar, regulate blood pressure, prevent allergies and autoimmune conditions from developing. It lowers cortisol levels when you're stressed, and it helps with depression and brain function by improving memory and cognitive ability. And one of the big functions it has is protecting the gut lining and preventing leaky gut. So you may have heard of leaky gut. Again, it's another thing that's very topical. I'm going to explain what that is in a minute. But it is the good bacteria's job to keep the gut closed. So you are actually born with leaky gut. It's how your mother's immune system and her antibodies go into the baby to give the baby a protection for the first 3 months of life while the baby's developing their own immune system. So in order for the mother's antibodies to get into the baby, they have to have a hole that's big enough to take these antibodies because they're big molecules. And so this is why you have leaky gut. Well, once the baby's born, the good bacteria starts to develop, and then the good bacteria seals up the lining at around 3 months of age and then keeps it closed as long as there's sufficient good bacteria. So that's a very important piece of information that should somebody be having conditions with leaky gut, obviously something has gone awry and their good bacteria isn't sufficient enough for them to keep the gut lining closed. So this is what your gut lining could look like. This is a representation, obviously, it's not what it really looks like. So the little purple things there are your cells of the gut lining. So this is how you absorb nutrients and other things that are beneficial to you into your bloodstream. And as you can see, those little blue dots, that's the good bacteria. And what they're doing is, if it looks like they're guarding the fort, that's basically what they're doing. So amongst all those other functions that I just rhymed off, they are protecting the gut lining. And those red splotchy things are either bad bacteria or yeast or anything that's not something that you want getting near your intestinal wall lining. And as you can see, as long as the good bacteria is there, they're not going to get anywhere near it. However, this is what we call dysbiosis. And so this is what we mean when we say lack of good bacteria. As you can see, there's still plenty of good bacteria there, but now there's spaces. So this particular representation, if this was a person, is missing some in certain spots. And as a result now, the red splotchy things can actually get at the gut lining if they needed to. And if they do that, it's going to set off inflammatory markers. It's going to damage the gut lining depending on what it is. In some cases, if it's a pathogen, like a bad bacteria, it might enter the bloodstream, cause a major infection. So again, having sufficient good bacteria is critical to sort of protecting us from things that may be not ideal for us that are in our intestinal GI tract. And this is what leaky gut is. So if we look at this, you can see the cells are all close together and there's no gaps. But if you look at this picture, you can see that the cells now have a gap. And so that's leaky gut, and that's not supposed to be there. And so you can see that things can now enter in through there that are big molecules and couldn't before because the good bacteria was there. And so if you were wondering what leaky gut and you weren't really sure what it was, that's what it is, and that's what it looks like. It is a natural process. You know, there are other reasons why the gut can open as we are adults. It does involve the immune system, but in a perfect scenario, we don't have the gut open. All right, so this brings me to food recommendations and, you know, sort of how things are approached in a lot of nutrition circles. So basically they blame the food. So there's a lot of food blaming going on, and I don't ascribe to that. And it really doesn't matter whether it is gluten or soy or dairy or fats or carbs or grains or, you know, whatever. Pick it. There's always somebody saying something about something. There's this pattern of demonizing the food. But by doing this, everyone's missing a fundamental piece of information. A problem with foods belongs to the person, not the food. So if all you do is remove the food, what you've done is take away the symptom, but you haven't resolved the cause. So the cause of why someone has a food sensitivity or allergy is not the food. It's a function of the body has gone awry. So even in the case of allergy, the reaction is not caused by the food, it's caused by a malfunction. And whether it's a food sensitivity or a food allergy, there's an immune response involved. So for food sensitivities, there's usually just what they call a straight inflammatory response. So it produces inflammation. This can cause gas and bloating. It can also, because inflammation is produced, make you achy or stiff or cause you headaches, or, you know, there can be some internal reactions as well. And in the case of an allergy, you have an immunological response. So that means that antibodies have been formed to the food. And as a result of this, you're having another type of immune system reaction. But the key here is that both reactions involve the immune system. And the truth about the immune system is that it looks for invaders in order to control and vanquish them. So that's its job. It thinks everything is an invader. And if the immune system had its way, it would attack everything that comes anywhere near it, including every food you eat. So that's, you know, if you have a food sensitivity or food allergy, you may consider yourself lucky it's just one food or two foods, because it could be all foods. The immune system could, in theory, do that. However, it's the job of the good bacteria to convert the food to a form that gives the food what is known as immune tolerance. And in doing so, you do not react to foods. And without immune tolerance, you could act to every food. So having insufficient good bacteria can mean an inability to provide immune tolerance to all foods. And then if this occurs, you might have a food sensitivity or an intolerance or perhaps a food allergy. But at no point is that the food's fault, is it? The food's just being the food. It's minding its own business, doing its food thingy. And it has no idea that when you eat it, that, you know, this is going to happen. So you can see this as good news, or you can see this as bad news. I tend to think it's good news, because that means you have something to work on, right? If you work on gut health, and if you have food sensitivities, you might be able to get rid of them. And I do know people who get rid of food sensitivities. We even know there are people who get rid of food allergies. So all children with anaphylactic peanut allergies, 25% of them outgrow the allergy. The problem is we don't know how. We don't know why. We just know that some people get past their allergies, some people get past their food sensitivities. Now, food sensitivities are a little easier to get past, and we do have more protocol information for them. Allergy is a little more difficult. So when it comes to demonizing food, we see this a lot in the case of gluten. So most of the research about the negatives of gluten are based on animal studies. So for example, they'll look at mice with IBS. And if you're wondering how a mouse gets IBS, it's they give the mouse IBS. They don't actually have IBS on their own. What that means is that they're looking at reactions when dysbiosis is already present. So the reactions to gluten are already going to occur because the good bacteria isn't sufficient. These mice don't have sufficient good bacteria, or else they wouldn't have IBS. And again, it goes back to this. So if a gluten molecule is not supposed to get near the intestinal wall lining, first of all, a gluten molecule is supposed to be broken down into single amino acids. That's what gets near the intestinal wall lining so that you absorb those amino acids to help you build things in your body. You build tissue and muscles and things like that from amino acids. So if you haven't digested it well, and you may not if you have insufficient good bacteria, and then the molecule can get at the intestinal wall lining, well, it sends a signal to the immune system that there's a pathogen there, because pathogens are made of protein and gluten is protein. And of course, the good bacteria is not there to deliver immune tolerance. And so as a result, then you have an inflammatory response. But the key here is that it's not the gluten that caused the problem, it's the lack of good bacteria. And again, there's nothing wrong if you have this situation, you're not having the gluten. That's one scenario, but if you don't have the right conversation about why gluten bothers you, you're not going to solve this problem. And I think we can all agree that the good bacteria needs to be in sufficient numbers because of all the other functions that it does that is so critical to our overall health and well-being. And I bring this study up because I think this is really interesting. And it's one of the reasons why we shouldn't jump on bandwagons and just start doing things because things become topical in the news. They did a study on healthy adults who were put on a gluten-free diet for about a month, and they looked at their colon bacteria before and after. And what they found was that their good bacteria had decreased and their bad bacteria had had a parallel increase. So in other words, they developed dysbiosis. They also found their immune system function was suppressed. Now, this has nothing to do with a gluten-free diet. You can have a very healthy gluten-free diet if you eat the right foods, but that's not what people are doing. They're just stopping, eating the gluten grains like wheat and rye and things like that, which are actually really, really good for your gut bacteria. They actually have elements in them that feed good bacteria. And then they replace it with these gluten-free products that are out there that are full of starches and gums and chemicals, and they don't eat good whole foods that are gluten-free to compensate for the, the foods that they took out. So it just shows why we shouldn't jump on bandwagons. And, if we do need to be gluten-free, we need to make sure we have a good quality gluten-free diet. And the same is true when they talk about foods being inflammatory. There's no such thing as an inflammatory food because the inflammation belongs to the person, not the food. And, one of the foods they love to say is inflammatory is dairy products. So I came across this study, and it's a meta-analysis study, which is a study of studies. And this looked at 7 different randomized controlled studies with people. And these were all people who consumed a lot of dairy. And they looked at inflammatory chemicals in the body. So C-reactive protein, interleukin-6, TNF-alpha. And what they found was in 3 of the studies, the high consumption of dairy lowered the inflammatory products, so it helped. And then the others showed that the dairy was neutral. So again, if you have an issue with dairy, it may cause you inflammation, but the dairy is not inflammatory to people who have a normal system. So we have to start looking at things in that context and not blame a food and start looking at what the actual function problem is within the body. And that's kind of the problem we have with the current nutrition, because it looks at kind of what we are, like they look at the mice who already have IBS instead of looking at the mice who don't have IBS and see what happens when they, are exposed to things. How do they react? And the other problem is we may never know, and we certainly don't know it now, what the perfect microbiome should be. But what we do know is how we should function. We know we should not have digestive issues or joint pain or headaches or cancer, diabetes, pick your condition. We know that a healthy person would not have these conditions. And we also know that the microbiome is involved with all these conditions. Either the good bacteria is preventing these conditions from developing, or bad bacteria is encouraging them to occur. So, this gives us something to work with. So basically, we need strategies to improve our microbiome, and it has to be things we do on a regular basis. It's not something, it's great to have some specific strategies you do for a given condition, but ideally, you are supporting the microbiome daily with, diet and lifestyle choices. And it should be something we know, like we should be doing it as a conscious decision. We should know that when we eat potatoes, we're getting resistant starch that feed good bacteria. We should know that when we're eating fermented foods that we're going to get certain benefits from it, so that when we make our choices, we know we're doing something right for our microbiome. So it shouldn't be something by chance that we just happen, oh yeah, I do eat that, so that's good. We should have a more, conscientious effort put into some of the food choices we make, so that we know we're supporting the microbiome. Now, this is something else I wanted to bring up to you, because if you think that probiotics help you replenish your good bacteria, they do not. They do not colonize inside of you, and you will see lots of websites that say that word. They'll say, oh yeah, you can take probiotics to help recolonize your gut. They don't do that. They do help you. They are very helpful, and there's many studies that show that they are beneficial for many things, but they don't stay. They're known as transient. I mentioned earlier that our native bacteria is residential, and that's the one that can colonize. But the transient bacteria, and this would include fermented foods as well, they just help us while they're there, and then they go on their way out the door, when we have a bowel movement. So even those probiotics made with human microflora, which some of them are, they don't stay either, because they're not our human microflora. They're somebody else's. So I think it's really important that we understand this. And basically, if you take probiotics, they leave in 2 weeks. So once you stop taking them, they will be completely out of your system within 2 weeks. But they will help you while they're there. So why is this significant? Well, it just means we need other strategies to recolonize our own bacteria. And as we mentioned earlier, based on what happened when you were an infant, and what your lifestyle is like and how stressed you are, our capacity to do this is going to vary. But we need to keep this in mind, because say you do take probiotics and they do help you, how well you recolonize your own bacteria will determine whether or not you stay on probiotics or not. And there's nothing wrong with staying on probiotics, but ideally you would probably prefer not to, and it would be a better statement about your microbiome if you did not need probiotics. And also what they're looking at right now with research is that certain strains are playing a role with various conditions. So for example, L. reuteri, L. casei, and L. gasseri help with calcium absorption and increasing bone density. L. plantarum and L. gasseri are associated with weight loss. L. acidophilus, L. casei, B. longum, and B. animalis reduce lactose intolerance. And are these available in foods? Yes, they are. Many of the fermented foods contain these strains. Not every fermented food contains all of these strains, but each one contains some of these. And if you learn to make your own, it's really fun and it's very easy. And I teach a lot of fermented workshops, plus I have an online fermentation course. And I always get the same comment from people about how easy it is to ferment foods. It's actually easier than cooking and baking. There's some set rules, and if you follow them, they will turn out every time Some of them are so darn easy, it's not funny. So this is a great thing to learn to do, because some of them are quite expensive. And if you learn to ferment your own, then you get to play with the flavors and make them to your own taste specification. So this is something that could be really good for you to do. On the other hand, there are plenty of fermented foods and real fermented foods in the grocery, not necessarily the grocery store, but the health food store, some in the grocery store, but definitely in the health food stores, there's lots of different fermented foods that you can buy now. So by understanding the strains and the research connecting them to specific conditions is going to help us, you know, sort of fit all the pieces of the puzzle together, and it'll help us make better choices. But there's a downside to this as well. So studying strains is helpful.
Lorraine, you're cutting out. Lorraine, can you hear me? Lorraine, can you hear me? Lorraine, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
No, you cut out and everything froze.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. I don't know if everyone else can hear you. Hang on a second. Yeah, no one can. They can't hear you. They said nothing is happening.
Can they hear me now? I think they can. If you can hear me, they should be able to hear me. Can you guys hear me now?
Hold on. Yes, Melissa said yes. Can hear both of you. Okay.
Okay, good. All right, I'll keep going. We're almost done.
Do you want questions at the end or in the middle?
At the end. I'm almost done.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So we were talking about the strains and what the downside is. So again, they're basically saying if you don't take the strain they've studied, then you're not going to get the benefit. But they don't know this. They can't tell you this because they don't know what strains are in you, and they may never know. The good news is, though, by studying these strains, they can create products that can help for a given condition. But it still is important that you work on the strains that you have in you, because that's your best health protection. All right. And now my screen will not advance. Can you still hear me, Marina?
Hang on. Yes, I can hear you. Oh, hang on. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but my screen's not advancing.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Okay, let me just escape out of screen share. Uh-oh. There I am. Yay, hi. And then I will go back in. All right. Give me 2 seconds. All right. I'm going back in. All right. Let me get back to where I was. Okay. So you can see that, right?
I can see it. Let me see.
It says therefore.
Can everyone see?
Yeah. Okay. So therefore, it is critical that you know how to support your gut, and you want to do it daily. Yes, you can take supplements, but having a diet and lifestyle choices that support your gut is key. And of course, I wanted to bring this up because I think it's important. Your mindset, you know, the capacity to heal belongs to the body, but it's up to you to activate the capacity. So you have to be ready and willing to make changes in order to activate this healing within you. And if you can recognize this and understand that this is very critical to helping you attain your goals, they have documented that there is an effect of thought on the gut bacteria. So it is important. There's a connection to thought for all types of healing from all types of conditions, but it's especially interesting that there's this communication going on between our thoughts and our gut. Okay, so what can you do? So first of all, you can learn about the digestive intestinal system so that you can make the right choices for you. That's the #1 perspective, because no one can tell you what's right for you. And the more knowledge you have, the easier it is for you to make the choices. You can eat foods that aid digestive and intestinal health and use lots of culinary herbs. That's what they're for. They do aid digestion. That's why we started adding them to food. And of course, they make everything tasty. And you can create an atmosphere for proper eating every time you eat. So you want to, eat in a calm manner. You want to chew your food. You want to make sure you're not drinking too much with your meals. You really want to make sure you're doing the best that you can do to help digest your food. You don't want to remove natural, real foods from your diet unless absolutely necessary. So, we're trying to get people to put whole foods in. So if you're already eating whole foods, be careful taking them out. You don't want to complicate your life. And it's important to know you want to go slow and have patience. It took you time to develop the issues, and it'll take time to resolve them. The other thing is to stay positive and believe in the innate ability of the body to heal. It just needs some help from us. And then on a specific level, what you want to do is eat fermented foods. So that could be sauerkraut or kimchi or kefir or yogurt or sourdough bread. There's some amazing research about sourdough bread and how it benefits you and how it helps you. Even though the bacteria in the sourdough bread is dead, apparently dead bacteria still helps you. And there's some research for that as well. And you want to eat prebiotic foods. So these are the ones that are going to actually help you grow your own good bacteria. So that could be garlic or onions or Jerusalem artichokes, the resistant starches that are in grains and legumes and potatoes. And there's a lot of prebiotics foods such as cabbage and almonds and blueberries and there's so many, and just having a lot of them in your diet will really help with your gut flora. You do have to make sure you digest them well, but they can really help your residential bacteria. You want to lower stress levels. So when you are stressed, it will lower good bacteria levels in your gut and increase bad bacteria levels in your gut. You want to create a very positive atmosphere for healing. So again, this will help with your stress levels, but if you know that when you are running around like crazy, if there's somewhere you can go, maybe it's your home, or maybe your home is too hectic, so maybe it's a spot in your house where you can go to sort of have some quiet time, or you can, go to a park nearby or something like that. You want to give yourselves, treats and an atmosphere that's very positive for you to help you, heal your gut and heal your body and just generally be in an atmosphere that's very productive for healing. If you need more help, you can see a practitioner. But learning as much as you can about your body and what it needs and likes can provide you with a lot of benefits, and it will teach you how to sort of support your body daily. So this is just a quick case study. Margaret is a 54-year-old. She suffers from joint pain, frequent heartburn, bloating, and general discomfort. The tests and x-rays did not reveal any missing cartilage. The doctor obviously wanted to put her on pain meds. She didn't want to do that. So I started her off with some recommended glucosamine and MSM product just because, just in case it was arthritis, although they couldn't give her the diagnosis. And there are some benefits to both of those for the gut as well, just for the record. And then we started looking at gut health. And it took a while. We worked on, digestive tips, and we put her on probiotics, and we got her eating fermented foods and prebiotic foods. And it took time. The acid reflux actually went away. The heartburn went away really quickly within about 3 weeks. And then the bloating gradually got less. And somewhere between the 8 and month to a year, she got rid of the joint pain. And it's because the joint pain wasn't really arthritis. The joint pain was because she was inflamed in her gut, and it was causing joint pain because she had inflammation throughout her body. And so this was really, really helpful for her. And she's doing really well even today. So it did take time, but it was certainly worth her while to, you know, sort of look at her gut and see how it could be improved to help her out. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the presentation. I did say I would tell you how you can get more information. That's the Jumpstart Digestion Program, which I run, is designed to make it very easy to get all the pieces. And I'm also trying to create a community of support for you to help you with your gut health so that you can get answers to your questions, because this area is evolving and, you know, new stuff's going to come up all the time. So I want to, you know, reach people and be able to have them have a forum where they can discuss things and get answers. So that's what the Jumpstart Digestion Program is for. And it's basically 4 modules with over 10 hours of content. It starts November 10th, and it includes a GI tract overview about how it works, role of the good bacteria, stress, and food. We'll be discussing the conditions related to gut health, some key steps and tips to start anyone to help solving their issues, food protocols, there's menu plans and shopping lists, and I have menu plans for any diet style, so vegan, vegetarian, paleo, regular, raw, lots of recipes. And it also includes a Candidiasis Dysbiosis ebook, a Leaky Gut ebook, a Nutrition Basics ebook, and all the modules come with references and transcripts, and you can do a little quiz at the end. You don't have to, it's optional, but if you want to just test to see what you learned, you can do the quiz. There's also a quiz to sort of start the program off to see where you are digestively. And there's a Facebook community page so that discussions can take place and questions can be posted and answered. And I do this with my healthy gut practitioners, and it's really nice to see people, you know, sharing information with each other. And of course, I answer questions and that sort of thing. Plus, there's 2 live webinars as a bonus. The first one will be on November 18th, and it's the Diet Dilemma, Pros and Cons of the current healthy diet. So if you're going to choose a certain type of diet, like a gluten-free diet or a paleo diet or whatever, this is to say how to have the healthiest version of that for the gut. And there's a special Q&A session on December 2nd. And the reason I like to do this is because it's really nice to see the other questions and get the discussion going. It can be very informative. And then bonus number 2, there's a special webinar that's available immediately about signing up, because the course doesn't start till November 10th, but it's called The Healing Effect of Thought. And it goes back to what we were talking about with the mindset and how thought can affect health and the gut, and then what you can do to sort of create a better healing environment and better healing thoughts. And then the final bonus, for the first 20 people who sign up for the Jumpstart Digestion Program, I'm offering a half-an-hour one-on-one session with me, and you can access it anytime. If you want to do it before, during, after, it doesn't matter to me, and it'll either be via Skype if you're long distance, or by phone if you're local. And I just wanted to share this with you because this really touched me when a client of mine sent this to me. And this is what she had to say. Lorena's helped me so much. I suffered with digestive issues all my life. I'm extremely sensitive to dairy and have been diagnosed with celiac disease. I did what most people do and cut out foods from my diet, but I was unhappy, unhealthy, and had a fear of food because I kept thinking the foods were the issues. Out of all my teachings I've encountered, Lorene made the most sense to me. She taught me how to really heal my gut and be able to alleviate the fear and introduce many nutritious foods back into my diet. Life is richer and more pleasurable when you can enjoy a variety of foods and their benefits. And so I share that with you because I'm so happy for this person, because this is a terrific human being. And it's so nice to see her progress in this way, but it's also to show you that it is possible to progress. And it's something she works on all the time. and yet is able to enjoy many, many aspects of her eating and life, and that's the way it should be. And I'll just share this one other thing. This is from a colleague of mine, and she basically saying that I've been her go-to person for nutrition information. And now as a wife and mother of two, having a program like this and to have ongoing support from Maureen is awesome. And the reason I share that with you is because this is a program that works for parents, it works for older people, younger people, athletes, you know, doesn't matter, everybody can use this information because it's just helpful for them understanding how their body works. And if you're wondering what it costs, it's not expensive. It's just $117 on early bird. And I did extend the early bird because of the issues on Tuesday. So now the early bird ends November 7th. And as a bonus for attending and as a thank you to you, there's a free ebook called Boost Your Metabolism Naturally. Since we were talking about the gut and how the gut helps with metabolism, I thought to give you a book on other natural ways to help your metabolism might be of interest to people. So there's a link on the sales page that you can, and I'll, as soon as I come out of the screen share here, I'll pop up the link to the sales page. You can just download it right away and get your free ebook. Okay, so I hope you really join me because it's a lot of fun. And on that note, I will now take your questions. So I'm going to stop my screen share. And I'm coming back. And here I am. Okay.
All right, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so Ramola, sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. She wants to know if a baby throws up, could that be because they don't have enough good bacteria?
Depends how violent the throw up is. There is something called projectile vomit. And it's one of the first signs that a baby's developing an allergy, and that they may be developing even a serious allergy to something they might go anaphylactic to in the future. So throwing up on its own, I mean, babies are going to be fighting viruses and colds and things as part of building their immune system. So, you know, it's always check with the doctor to make sure that, you know, the temperature's not too high and that sort of thing. But generally just throwing up on its own is not necessarily the fact that they have too little good bacteria. It is a sign that they do have a good immune system because they're reacting. I hope that makes sense.
Thanks. Mary Helen wants to know what about omega-6s? I think it's probably because when you were discussing inflammation.
Okay, well, omega-6 has the ability, sorry, somebody texted me and they want me to pop up the link to this sales page, so I'm just going to do that. There we go. Okay, so omega-6 has two pathways. It can be both inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. And you have to understand that even the inflammatory pathway, which is it goes to, makes arachidonic acid, and then arachidonic acid produces PG2, which is inflammatory. You actually have benefits in your brain for arachidonic acid. So it's not like this is a bad thing. But omega-6 can also be converted to what they call DGLA, and it's anti-inflammatory. So it depends on what signals the body is receiving, and specifically the liver, in order to determine whether omega-6 would be inflammatory or not. And if it is causing a lot of inflammation, then there's probably chronic inflammation required, which means there isn't enough gut bacteria.
Thank you. So Kelly wants to know what kind of bacteria would you recommend for good bacteria would you recommend for autoimmune diseases?
That's really interesting. I was just reading an article today about multiple sclerosis, and they were really saying that this focus on strains doesn't seem to be the whole story, that it's more about what the microbiome produces as products. So there's some beneficial things called short-chain fatty acids that good bacteria produces when it ferments carbohydrates, and in specifically the foods that have the resistant starch. And these short-chain fatty acids turn off inflammation that is connected with autoimmunity and help support the immune system in a manner that, because right now the way they see autoimmunity is it's a weakened immune system, not a overactive immune system. So the short-chain fatty acids strengthen the immune system. In terms of probiotics that I would recommend, I would probably recommend something very high dose, like the BSL-3, which is quite expensive, if you were really active. And then if you weren't really active and maybe you were in a period of remission with the autoimmunity, or there was some control going on with it, something lower dose. The problem with autoimmunity is that it's often, medical people say don't take probiotics because they put you on immune suppressive drugs. And of course, probiotics help promote immune system function. So it's countering basically what the immunosuppressive drugs are doing. But what they were saying in this article is that that's the wrong approach. And again, we can't counter what doctors say and do, but at least we can present them with the information, and maybe they'll, you know, think twice about, you know, prescribing the immunosuppressive drugs. But that's what they were saying, is that it's been the wrong approach, and that basically what they should be doing is building up the gut. So any probiotic would be helpful. There's products from Renew Life that are good. There's products from Metagenics are good. Soroil are good. New Roots Herbal is good. There's a lot of really good products out there. And probably with somebody with an autoimmune condition, I would recommend trying various probiotics until they found the one that seemed to work the best for them.
Thanks. So Ramala wants to know, how can we know what strains we have in us?
Unfortunately, unless you get picked to be part of a research study, because that's what they do in a lot of these microbiome projects, they map the colon bacteria, they map the small intestine bacteria of whoever the participants are, and this is how they're able to get the results that they get. And understand that their, you know, gut bacteria grew, or they did this, or it did that, or it helped with this, or it's causing inflammation, or it's not causing it. Like, this is how they find it out. We're not at a point right now where we can, you know, go for a test. It's not something we can do yet. It costs a lot of money to map our good bacteria, but hopefully, like everything else, as it becomes more common and prices go down. Remember, computers used to be really, really, really expensive, and they took up a whole room. And now they're little things that we can buy for a few $100s. So hopefully we'll get to the point where they can test it, but we're not there yet.
Okay. Sheila wants to know, how do I work on my strains?
Prebiotic foods. That's your best bet. There are some other issues involved about the condition of your intestinal wall lining, because you do need a healthy intestinal wall lining for your strains to be reproducing. That's another topic. I mean, I do talk about that in the Jumpstart Digestion program, but I only had so much time here to cover so many things. But in general, it's prebiotic foods are going to be your best bet. And assuming, without knowing how, if you have major health issues, some people do react to prebiotic foods, so you may have to start with probiotics that have prebiotics added.
Okay, great. And Kelly wants to know, how do you properly supplement with probiotics?
You follow the instructions on the bottom. So every probiotic company will tell you what is right for their product. If it needs to be between meals, if it needs to be with meals, you know, so you just follow the instructions on the bottle, because they have formulated their product to fit, you know, what their product should do.
Okay, and Mary Helen wants to know, what about those who react to inulin or to prebiotics like inulin?
There is a product from Metagenics that has a prebiotic called IMO. Don't ask me what it stands for. It's a big, long word. And it has been shown to be less reactive than inulin or FOS. And so I would start with that. Because if you react to inulin, you're probably going to react to some of the prebiotic foods too. So you start there with the probiotics and the IMO, and then when you feel better, then you can start working the prebiotic food in.
Okay. Carol and Ricky want to know where your clinic is and where you're located.
I don't have a clinic. I'm located in Richmond Hill, Ontario, and I do stuff via Skype. I do Skype stuff, so I do it online. I know despite my cutting in and out, I'm actually a very big online person. I just find it's more convenient for people, it's more efficient, and so that's what I do.
Okay. Allison wants to know, is there any way to find out about for unique stomach bacteria, or is trying to improve my gut and is an exercise of trial and error?
Unfortunately, it is a bit of trial and error. So, you know, one of the things that I teach in the Jumpstart Digestion program is, you know, how you can document and observe what's happening with you so that it makes the trial and error a little more effective. But yeah, it is a little bit of trial and error. Again, it's hard in a webinar like this because I don't know what the specific health issues are. And so there is more information when it's a specific health issue. So there's specific things you can do when it's like food sensitivities, and it's a specific thing when, you know, you're working on diabetes, or, you know, it depends what you're working on. So, there's always going to be trial and error because no one can tell you what's right for you. So you have to become observant about you and just see what's working for you. One of the nice things is, though, if you have people to consult with, when you experience something, you have somebody to ask and say, is this normal? Could this be a detox reaction? Could this be, you know, a sensitivity? Could this be, you know, you have somebody to talk to sort of help you, because that's what I find with most people. That's the kind of questions I get asked the most. Even from my fellow practitioners, I get asked those questions. It's really neat to have the ability to have discussions with other people.
Okay, great. And Sheila wants to know, what do you do when fiber is her enemy and causes diarrhea? A result from short gut syndrome, intestines out twice, and the resection of the colon due to cancer.
Okay, so that would definitely be a circumstance where you're going to be more dependent on probiotics. And then what you have to do is, I'm assuming that, do you find a difference between cooked and raw food? Are you better with cooked than you are with raw? Because if that's the case, then you go for more cooked. The IMO might also be okay for you as well. Again, you'd have to try it and see. But yeah, that would be, you have to go and I have to say this, and I say this to everyone I work with, you always go slow with anything you're introducing. You never, you know, even, I don't care what the bottle says. If it says 3 capsules a day, you start with 1 capsule, maybe you wait a couple of days, and then you try 1 capsule again. And especially when you're dealing with serious issues, you do want to go slowly always. It allows you to be more observant, and you aren't going to trigger any major detox reactions. And you may also have to start, and this would be very interesting to do, just a small, tiny amount of something with some fiber in it, like maybe some, like a tablespoon of blueberries or something like that. And you just start very, very slowly to see what your system can take. And then you gradually work up. And then if you hit a point where it's too much, you back down to where it was more suitable for you.
And Kelly wants to know, she says, okay, thanks. On NSAIDs, which is messing up with good bacteria, antacids, etc. I don't know if that's a question, or a comment, but I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Well, NSAIDs, or aspirin and ibuprofen, damage the intestinal wall lining. So I mentioned earlier that, you know, sometimes the problem with not having enough good bacteria has to do with the fact that the intestinal wall lining is damaged. That would be a circumstance if somebody has been on those drugs chronically that could be occurring, and that would interfere with your good bacteria, because the good bacteria needs the gut lining to reproduce. That's how it colonizes. In terms of antacids, antacids, I didn't mention this, but you do actually have some good bacteria and some other organisms in your stomach as well. So they're pretty hearty, and some of them are okay with antacids and some of them are not. But antacids just generally screw up digestion, so that material isn't really entering into the intestines the way it should in order to digest, you know, properly.
And Ricky wants to know if there's a way to find out what kind of strains are through a stool sample, what kind of strains you have.
They do exist as
how good it is, sorry.
But you have to, yeah, my understanding is that if you were to do a stool test, they say you went to a naturopath who would possibly do this and have tests like this, they have to state what strains they're looking for. It's not like you can get across, you have like so many, what they do, and especially when they do the research, what they do is they pick specific strains they look for, and that's what they test for. As I said, the mapping of the entire strain of your stool, all the strains in your stool, is a very expensive thing that isn't available to the public yet.
Yeah, I think she was re-clarifying and saying she wants to know if they could tell if you have a good percentage of good bacteria to bad.
I have to find out. I don't know. It's possible. They can certainly tell that you have too much yeast in comparison to bacteria, so they can determine that. There's tests for that, but they can't necessarily say, because they don't know what the ideal percentage is. They know approximately. It's supposed to be about 85%. Some say 80%, but other sources say 85% should be good bacteria.
Thanks. Kathy has a good comment to make. She said, my autoimmune disease is doing much better on fermented foods and probiotics than I ever did on prednisone, plaquenil, and NSAIDs. Fantastic.
It's funny because what is that? What Quinel one? That was it. That was the one they were talking about in this article that I was reading on multiple sclerosis today.
Okay, so Anne wants to know if probiotics would help with her severe menstrual cramps and fibroids, and this, or is this purely hormonal, as my gynecologist says?
Well, that's right in my alley of expertise and my personal experience, because you were here, I don't know if you were here at the beginning, I told my endometriosis story with my fibroids and cysts and all that sort of stuff. So yes, so those conditions, and again, it's complicated. You need to do liver work, you need to do adrenal work, but you will not really thrive without gut work to resolve your menstrual issues and your fibroid issues. I had it to the point where, because my fibroids were on the outside of my uterus, so I could feel it. So I could feel it shrinking, And if I misbehaved and my gut sort of got off, this is over, you know, I was doing this over several years time, right? I could feel it grow again. So it was really obvious to me how important gut health was to me and fibroids. And it wasn't until I, you know, sort of found the right sort of foods and combination of things that I resolved the fibroids once and forever.
Hey, Shady wants to know if probiotics can be useful for someone who's had their stomach and part of their intestines removed due to cancer.
Yes. So the problem when surgical situations have occurred is that there's now permanent alterations to the overall gastrointestinal system in a manner that means that what might work for people whose gastrointestinal systems are intact is not going to occur. So by taking the probiotics, you end up giving the body something to work with, and it doesn't necessarily have to make its own in order to have these functions covered that probiotics can do. And so this is a tricky topic, but essentially, so what a probiotic does, even though it passes through you, it does do the work that your own good bacteria could do. Depending on what strains are in it, it's going to do the work that those strains do in order to help you. So they could be very, very helpful. And I would recommend one from New Roots Herbal, and I forget what it's called, but it's 20 billion and it has 18 strains. So you want something with many strains because you don't know what you have and what you don't have because of the surgery. What's it called? I think it was called Urgency. It's in my fridge. I could go look in my fridge. It's the one I hadn't tried it before, so I always try these things to see what they're like. I don't normally take probiotics on a regular basis, but I always keep some, like if I feel a cold coming on or something like that, I start taking them. Or if I get stressed and my bowels stop working because I get constipated when I'm stressed, I'll start taking something for that. It's either that or kefir. Those are my two go-tos. Anyway, so yeah, but it's not hard to find. It's 18 strains, it's 20 billion, and it's from New Roots Herbal.
It doesn't look like there's any more questions.
Oh. All right.
Yeah. Shady says thank you very much, and Sheila says thank you, and yeah. Ricky,
okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if there's no more questions, then I want to. How do I about BioK? Sorry, I got the chat up now. I can see it.
Yeah. Okay.
It's helpful. It's 50 billion. They're live. So when you have things like a supplement, they are dry and therefore they have to meet up with water to become active again. Whereas the BioK, just like yogurt and kefir and fermented foods, is ready to rock. But it's only 2 strains. But it's certainly, you know, it's worth trying and seeing how you like it. If you get good results from it, it's good. Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, I want to thank you all very, very much. I will be sending out, you'll get the replay automatically, but I'll also send out a follow-up email. And as I said, you can get the free ebook on the sales page, and I'll send a link for that out as well. And I thank you all very, very much for attending. This was a lot of fun, and I'm glad the technology hung in for the most part to get me through this. I had a little nervous bit there for a minute, but hopefully it all worked out and you all heard what I had to say. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, and you all have a really, really good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.